And greetings and welcome to the QCast Season 3, Episode number 2. And here we are in the school season. We're getting excited about D3 hoops in 2022-23. And I thought, what a great place to go. But the head coach of the team that lost in the national championship game, got all the way there, an amazing season. Welcome to my friend John Baines, the head coach of Elmhurst University. John, I really appreciate you doing this. And as we talked about, people know you as the head basketball coach, but in Division III, there's a lot of hats you have to wear. So what sport is it that you're currently coaching right now?
Well, I'm technically listed as the assistant men's golf coach, but our head coach, who happens to be my head assistant, Peyton Wyatt, is the head men's coach. And so his wife is going to have a baby tomorrow, and so I'm taking the golf team over. So, I've been the men's tennis coach. I've been a kinesiology professor. You're pretty much doing it all at this level.
Is there any chance that John Shire is currently coaching a golf team? Is that possible?
Usually about the time I'm carrying a big cooler of water around, I say, is Bill Self doing this? I just don't think he is, but it comes with the territory, and I guess I'm used to it.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and best wishes to Coach Wyatt and his wife. Hope everything goes great. In preparation for this, John, I was kind of blown away. I talked to Maya Smith last week on the show, and I was blown away by how long she had been at Illinois Wesleyan. And I'm like, John's been the head coach now. This is his 10th year at Elmhurst. Yeah. Does that a little bit, when you step back and say it's already been 10 years, does that surprise you?
It really has. You think about being somewhere as a coach for a decade, and I was an assistant there for 10 years. So, it's been 20 years at one place, and I've loved it, and I love Elmhurst. It's funny when you start and you're at the age of 23, you don't really think to yourself, 25 years later, I'm going to be here, or 23. I went to St. Francis for 3, but that it is kind of surreal in that sense.
Coming off an amazing season, that's a good place to start, is what happened last year. I mean, to think about a 27-7 season in which you win the CCIW Conference Tournament Championship, you make an amazing run to the Final Four with a tough road, some incredible games along the way. You get to the Final Four, you win the national semifinal game against Wabash, you get to the national title game, you fall to the eventual champs Randolph-Macon. But as you step back, I mean, what an amazing season for the Blue Jays last year. As you look back on that, John, what are your thoughts on last season?
Yeah, I think it hit me maybe in August this year, what we had done. You're in the moment at the time, and then you get in the summer, and you're just kind of like, you're talking to coaches and you're recruiting, and you're like, hey, we got to get the next class through. And I think when I think it was vacation, I was like, man, that was a crazy run. But part of that whole thing, everybody kind of says, hey, talk about that last month. For me, it was like a 2-year thing, because we had been in the Sweet 16 that 2 years ago, the 2 years before that, and before COVID shut it down, and we were hot. I mean, who knows? You got to have luck to get that far. But we won 2 games by 20 in Worcester, and we had a really good team. And we got shut down, and that whole next year, it was our recruiting pitch wasn't to get new players; it was just to bring the old ones back. And then the whole year was odd. This past year, we did get shut down in January. A funny story, with COVID, we had 14 guys get it all at once, and 2 assistants. And there was a time you have a 5-day, you're out, and then you have a 5-day return to play. And on the return to play, they can't play; they're just on the sidelines. And I was playing 4-on-4 with 7 guys for 5 days, and I'm 46 years old. And so I was kind of envisioning in my head, is this really how we're putting this? This is what I was waiting 2 years for. But it all worked out. It was so much fun. And the other thing it did is it really electrified our campus, and I hate that, you don't want to bring up the COVID stuff, but campuses needed something. And for us, we needed it. And it really just put a shot in the arm for everybody. And it was really fun. You go over to the bookstore and you have a couple professors come over to you and just say, this is incredible, John, and all that, and I'm like, that really gave me a sense of purpose. And when you asked me about being there for a decade, you're like, well, this is why it's worth it.
And I remember during the Final Four seeing some footage from one of the three major Chicago networks. I think it was ABC, but someone did a watching the team get on the bus kind of story. And like, this is Chicago. This isn't Terre Haute, Indiana. No offense to Terre Haute. This is Chicago doing a story on a Division III team. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a big deal. And so that must have felt like for your guys to get to experience that. Division III, you don't get a lot of attention, but to feel that must have been pretty cool for you as a coach, knowing your guys were getting to go through that.
It was, and there's a saying that you're all on the same bus, but you're not taking the same ride. And we had some old guys, and for me, that was really special because they did invest in us, and they said, we're going to get our MBAs and we're going to put our lives on hold and come back for a 6th year. And then you had young guys who they didn't know anything about that ride, and they're just excited, they're pumped. And I just think that was really fun for me, just to see a bunch of guys that are on a bench and they're like, they had no idea the climb that it took to get to that spot. And they think it's kind of easy, and it's not. And so, there's a lot of things that I took from it, and I was really at peace with a lot of stuff. The one thing that really helped me, and I know that so much of Division III and the whole world or nation had got embraced by Justin Hardy and his story. And I actually had messaged with Justin whenever we were getting ready for the CCIW tournament, and just messaging with him and where he was at, and he had run the ESPN special at that point, really put a lot of things in perspective for me. And it gave me a great sense of peace. I actually put his initials on my hand during a run. And it just kind of made me look down at my hand every once in a while and just be like, this is just basketball. You got a bunch of 23, we had 23s, 23 to 18-year-old guys that are they're here to enjoy it. And I need to enjoy it. It's been a lifetime of getting to this spot, and don't get all worked up on everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. The whole Justin Hardy story and the perspective that came from that, pretty mind-blowing. Going back to the COVID year, John, that I can still see that bracket in my head. You guys had Pomona-Pitzer coming in, right? And that was a year where 8 teams were going to the Final Four, right? So you were a win away from going to Fort Wayne.
Yep.
North Central had Wash U and Naperville. So within the CCIW, you had North Central and Elmhurst. How many miles apart are the two schools? It's not a 15 miles?
15, 20, something like that.
I mean, both were hosting, chance to get to the Elite Eight. I'm just wondering, at what point, what was your shutdown story? Where were you, your guys, when that whole thing got shut down?
Yeah, it was a Thursday night. Pomona was actually from what I heard, was getting on the plane, and they stopped them getting on the plane and pulled them off. We had practice, we'd watched film, and then 2 hours later had to call them back and tell them that we were done. And boy, one of the hardest things I've had to do as a coach. It really, because you knew there were some guys they were going to come back, and then you knew that there were some guys that weren't. And it just, that was our story. It was, here was the weird one. It was Thursday night, and then on Friday, our president said everybody was going online, and Monday, no one's there. And boy, you talk about you're getting ready to host an NCAA tournament game in the Sweet 16, and you're talking about all where the fans are and all this stuff, and then it's just boom, and then 3 days later everybody's gone. And I mean, I think anybody who's ever watched our games knows that my wife kind of gets into it in that corner. She took it extremely hard, and I think that was one of those moments in marriage where you realize how much the two of you have invested, and we really, that was a night. That was a night where we kind of commiserated.
That was such a tough time for everybody. And looking at the bracket this year, the tournament now is back. You're in it, and they acknowledge that they did this on purpose. Pomona-Pitzer is in your bracket, right? So here comes Pomona-Pitzer to Elmhurst, the game that should have been. Mike Shower said, of course it was an homage to 2 years ago. Of course it was, which was really cool. There was a couple other games that were just like that. And in that game, you guys were in trouble. And, in any run, as you know better than anybody, in any Final Four run, there are some dicey moments that you have to find a way, right? And in the first half of that game, I don't remember the score. I just remember watching it thinking, oh my gosh, like the Blue Jays are in some trouble here. How did you guys flip that game around against the Sage Hens?
We were in major trouble.
Yeah.
We were down 14 at half, and Charlie had his team playing really well. And they were making some shots, like anything, they were making some shots. We were missing some, so that kind of accentuated it. But, we had a talk at halftime and made a couple adjustments here and there. But I'll tell you, it really was the players. The thing I remember is there was like 2 minutes on the clock at halftime where guys were still warming up and usually layup lines and all that. Our starting lineup was at half court, like ready, and it was really funny to me at the time. You're like, I was just like, what are we going to do? We're down to 14, but they had a little switch in them, and that I just think that they said to themselves, this isn't it. This isn't the time. And so I was really proud of them. You do all these things as a coach for adversity and resiliency and how to get some grit in your team. And it's all coach speak sometimes. But I think that was the time that some of that stuff came together. And it was like, yeah, this is why he does this stuff at practice and puts us in these positions, because we got to come together and make it happen. And they did. They were awesome.
You get sent for the sectionals out to Case Western Reserve, where, again, this whole bracket ended up being really weird, right? It's like everyone's just penciling Oshkosh in. And then they lose in this thriller. And all of a sudden, Case Western Reserve is hosting. And and forgive me, because I was watching my own game in person at the time and didn't watch it like I normally would be, but you end up against Mary Hardin-Baylor in the game to go to the Final Four, which was an incredible game. Talk through the Mary Hardin-Baylor game and the way that thing ended.
That was a really crazy game. I'm going to say this, and no offense to Jake Rhode and anybody on our team, because Jake was the best player that's ever put on a uniform at Elmhurst, and he's an two-time All-American. We were watching the film before Mary Hardin-Baylor, and I told Peyton Wyatt, I said, we might have the third best player on the floor right now, because they had two studs, and then they had a lot of other talent.
Yeah,
and they were good. And Cliff had them. They run a kind of an odd defense a little bit. It's a really high on the ball. It's kind of a man zone type thing. Cliff hates it when he calls it zone, but it's a little man zone. And and you got one day to prepare for that thing. So that was a crazy game. I was the thing that really popped out there. It's weird how you were talking about, like, there's luck and there's things that happen. Bryce Drews makes 3 threes in the first half of that game. And Bryce had a good year for us, but we were down at half of that game, and Bryce had made 3 threes. And if he doesn't make 3 threes, we're probably down double digits in that one, and may not win that one either. And then Dom Genco comes up. How many times do you run a decoy with your All-American so that the backup point guard can get an and one at the end of the game? And he was playing so well. Dom was probably our best player in the last 2 weeks of the season, the way he was playing. And it was just a lot of things fell into place. And then at the same time, and Wes Hooker, we usually always foul at the end of games, and we're in that timeout, and there's like 2 seconds left, and Wes was like, don't foul. I'm going to guard him. And, and you hate saying, like, you hate going back on it, but he was right there on him. And so it's just that was a great game. I wish we weren't in Cleveland where 50 people got to watch it. I
Right.
wish it would have been either at a place where there's a lot more people, but it was an all-time classic game for me. And yeah, and I have this picture in my office, and I'll let it go. But Peyton Wyatt has played for us, and he's been an assistant for us for 6 years, and he's been awesome. And just he's got his head in my shoulder, and he's been with me. It's weird, for 9 of the 10 years, and it was a culmination for him too, because it's just when you're a player and a coach and you get all that, I've got that one kind of saved away from me, and I'm like, that's just a unique bond, and you don't get that feeling unless you win that game.
And isn't it pretty amazing? Division I, Division II, Division III, there isn't any difference in the emotion.
No.
What you went through that night and what whoever you went, Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, whoever, there is literally no difference in the emotion from Division I to II to III to NAI. Would you agree? I mean, you had some very deep feelings when you earned your way to the Final Four that night in Cleveland.
Well, it is the same. I mean, the kids aren't that, they're not that different. I mean, they're 20-year-olds, and there's all the things that everybody talks about at different levels, the NIL and the transfers and the money, all the money that's out there, all that stuff. They're still 20-year-olds, and it's funny, when a girlfriend breaks up with them, they're still down and they don't play as well, and when they get a big win, they're on an ultimate high, and it's all the same. And it's just people. We talk so much about levels, and that's just the place. The whole thing with this deal is, in basketball and coaching, is people. And I'm coaching people, and it doesn't matter a lick to me about the level, and I don't think for them it really matters either when they're out there putting the uniform on.
Well, very well said. You go to the Final Four in Fort Wayne, and you put on a show in the national semifinal game against Wabash. I mean, you just beat them soundly. An amazing performance by your team. And then you're facing Randolph-Macon. They've been won the entire season. Going into the Randolph-Macon game, what was the game plan? What were you thinking? What was the prep going into facing RMC?
Yeah, I can tell you what it was, and should have been the opposite of it, all the things I said. I talked to some guys. I'm not name dropping. I go down and I work Jay Billis's camp in the summer, and John Krikorian from Christopher Newport had played them and had done really well against them in the past, and so I picked John's brain, and I blame him wholeheartedly for the loss. It was first. There's a lot of things. Josh had an unbelievable team. They were really
loaded.
Good. Yeah. And they had the best player in the nation. And he just really, the game just went through him. And, as the coach, you love that. And I was actually, I'm like, man, that kid is just really, you watch filming, like, man, he has really got a handle on what's going on out there. And then I thought they played really well. I did not think we played really well. I wish we would have had a day to prepare. You always kind of have those regrets anytime, but we got off the floor and got back after you do the presser and everything, and it's 11 o'clock, and then they have the Reese's All-Star game the next day, so you can't be on the floor past noon. So the guys had told me, they said, I know Josh had said his team didn't run through all year this year at all. And our team always ran through. And our guys like, Coach, we run through. It's what we do. I want to do it. So we got back at the hotel 11, and we're back on the floor at 11 o'clock again for a run through. I wish I wouldn't have done that. But I guess if we would have lost and I wouldn't have done it, then the players would have said, why didn't you run us through? But I just felt like it was an emotional game. We didn't have a ton of legs, and it was the same for them too. So I'm not blaming that. I was just saying I wish we had a day, because I think we could have had a little bit better game plan against their zone, and we would have played better.
But it was one of those things, and I think you'll agree with this, where people debate who's number one and who's number two and who's number three. Getting to see all the teams there in person in Fort Wayne, I mean, no one left with really much debate on who the number one team was in terms. I mean, they were just loaded. You
Yeah.
guys would have had any other team in Division III would have had to play their best game of the year to beat them. I
Yeah.
mean, just credit to them, right? I mean, they were. You mentioned Buzz Anthony, but the whole cast. I
Yeah.
mean, just loaded and pretty impressive program that he's built there at Randolph-Macon. I mean, they really have it going.
They really do. It's funny, Josh and I had not met Josh at all. The first time we shook hands before the game was the first time I'd ever met him. And I actually said to him, I said, everybody says you're a pretty good guy. I really kind of would like to talk to you at some point. And he kind of smiled and he said, we called each other about a couple of weeks after the game, and we've actually talked to each other probably about 3 times this summer. And it's really funny. He's I say this humbly, we do a lot of similar things, and it was I think he's done an unbelievable job, and I think there's just a way that good programs get built, and he's found that niche in that way. And I was just sitting there thinking, I got to steal some of this stuff because he's put together a juggernaut.
Amazing season. I mean, it was awesome to see a CCIW team in Fort Wayne. I thought you guys carried the flag incredibly well. Your guys played hard. They played smart. Your program, John, I'm just curious as to where you see it because, I remember a time when Elmhurst wasn't a team that you associated with the top 25 and the NCAA tournament, and here you are. I think we can say perennial team that you think about when you're writing down your ballot or you're thinking of who's going to win the CCIW. Where did the corner turn for Elmhurst? Was it the Mark Scher era? Where did things start to turn where Elmhurst became a big time factor?
Well, we had some really good coaches. I mean, the 3 coaches that came before me, Jim Weitzel is coaching up at Buffalo, and Scott Trost
Yep.
is coached at Illinois Wesleyan and been to the Final Four, and he's at D2 Lewis and done a great job there. And Mark was a great mentor to me coming out of Illinois Wesleyan and taught me an awful lot. And so, we had a little run when I was an assistant where we were in the top 10 in the nation 3 times in a row. So we were scratching the surface and we were getting there. We didn't have a lot of tournament success. I will say, getting to the tournament was really hard back then because there was a time we went 21-6 and missed it because of regional wins, and that sort of thing. I think whenever I got back here and I think we had the Kyle Weist and Brian Ackerman and Will Nixon, that group of guys that came in, and I think that it kind of set a little bit of a foundation, and it really helped us recruit. I mean, that's what it comes down to. You start winning a little bit, and you start doing that. I'm not going to take the credit for it. Our players got better. We got really good players, and I think we figured out our niche and the type of guys what we want to recruit. And they're tough, and they play hard, and they take a lot of pride in being in the gym. And so I think that was part of it. I think for me, I think I've learned what I am, and as a coach, and I think that's part of it. I'm a relationship driven coach, and I want to be a 1%er. And I put that to our guys. I said, guys, what are you? What are we? What's our identity? And I'm not afraid to say that. And I think there was a time in my life where I was either trying to be humble and I wouldn't say that, or we weren't in a place where I could say it. And now I'm not. I say that just as I think it gives our guys confidence to know that we can go for that, and then and we can still also have fun and have a good relationship with the guys. And I will say this: there was, and I go on it, but we started the year with a plan. It sounds silly, but I gave them a little plan. Which, by the way, we knew wouldn't die. We got like the easiest plan in the world that you like I told the GA, I said, whatever you do, this thing cannot die. And so the guys had to take care of it and water it and do all this kind of stuff. It was this little plant, and they don't ever sometimes know what I'm doing with this corny stuff. But about right before our first meeting, right before the season, I said, the plant stayed alive. You've given it sun, you've given it water, guys have taken it out, doing all this stuff. Why isn't it bigger? Why isn't it bigger? And they're like, well, coach, we should have done. I said, no, we've done everything you're supposed to do to take a plant. And I said, the reason it's not bigger is because the pot it's in is too small. The only way this thing gets any bigger is if you expand the pot. And we had the pot, and I had the potting soil, and they replanted a pot, all that nonsense. But I felt like for our guys, the pot had to get bigger, and they had to dream about having a bigger plant, and we were capable of it. And so that was the right time for this team. And I think right now, for our program, I think we've decided that the pot needs to be bigger. And unfortunately for me, when man's minds expand, they don't go back to the original shape. So we're where we're at, and we better produce.
And great points about, Jim Weitzel coaching there, and Scott Trost. And wouldn't you have liked to have a reality show when the staff for a while was Scott Trost and Bosco Jurakovic? Wouldn't you like to have watched the tape?
It would have been a lot better than the Jersey Shore, I can tell you.
It really would have. I think about that to this day. I'm like, Trost and Bosco, that's amazing. Well, go ahead.
Bosco definitely would have been the guy that would have been Jim Tan Laundry. So
that's a great point. And Elmhurst has always had great players. Like I remember Kent Jones going back in the day, and then of course you were probably there right at the end of the Ryan Newpel era, and then Chris Martin and Ruben Slock and Brent Ruck. All of these great players. Your university, John, just talk a little bit, because what I found is the people I meet in Division III that know I'm from a CCIW school, they just think every school's in Chicago. They have no idea where these schools are, and that they're all in very different places, and that the schools are very different.
Yes.
From Milliken to Wheaton to Augustine and Elmhurst, dramatically different schools. Talk for people that don't know anything about Elmhurst University, about the school a little bit, kind of who goes to Elmhurst, what does it specialize in? I think people would find that interesting.
Yeah, we're straight west of the city, and we're actually the largest in the CCIW with 3,000 students, and we're actually one of the most diverse. And I think that's been really something that's cultivated over the years. And it's actually, you can see it on our basketball team too. We've got Greeks, we have guys that are Polish, we have African-American guy, we got the whole gamut. So I think that's part of it. I think one of the things that we've really specialized in, we have an MBA program, and we've got a really great business program. And we have other guys doing other things, but that's been 2/3 of our guys are business guys, and that's really been big. We're so close to the city, the internships and the job placement and all that stuff. The academic piece, that's been the draw. And I think the other part is, Chicago. When you say Chicago, sometimes to somebody from Indianapolis or Michigan, they get that connotation of the crime on the south side. And Elmhurst is about the safest place in the world. I can't even afford to live there. We live right next door, but it's a great place. And obviously, I've been here 20 years. I love it.
And you've done a great job, I think, in recruiting, of leveraging what I believe is the best city in America. Now I'm a native of the South Side, where you just give a shout out to the crime. Here I am on the South Side. But I think Chicago is the greatest place in the country, and you've done a great job of leveraging. I think for the Central Illinois kids, hey, come and play in the city, come and play in Chicago, right? Yeah. If you're from Indiana, pretty good thing to leverage, right? Is having the big city sitting right there, just 20 miles to the east or whatever, right?
It is. It's been a huge draw for us. It's always been a draw. We just have found we've changed our recruiting style a little bit. I'll be perfectly honest. You go downstate, and Milliken Kramer's done a good job down there, and Illinois Wesleyan Rosie, he he picks a lot of guys off, and we just decided we can drive down there and we can get in that recruiting battle over and over and over again, or else we can go somewhere else. There's a lot of good players out there,
Yeah.
and we can go get them. And if they're good, then they come play for us, and we'll be right in there with everybody.
Let's talk a little bit about first the guys that were seniors last year. We won't get to everybody here. I just want to talk about a few, but you had a great group, and many of them had to make a tough decision to return an extra year after COVID. The list I came up with, and I hope I didn't miss it: Jake Rhode, Lavon Thomas, Dom Genco, Jay Militello, Bryce Drews, and Hunter Merritt. I think that was your senior group last year. I want to talk about Jake Rhode for a second. No, he was injured. There was COVID. He ends up being in your program for 6 years, I believe. I mean, I tell you what, this guy, he was an absolute stud. What did he mean to your program? Not just your season, John, but your program over the period of time that he was a Blue Jay.
Well, there's the obvious stuff. I mean, he broke the scoring record. He broke the assist record. I was recruiting him in the summer, trying to get him to come back for a 6th year. And I said, if you're the best player and the leading scorer and the assist guy and the best team that's ever played here, you're the GOAT. And he was like, okay, let's do it. Here's the thing that, like, the non-stat stuff. He and I, after you get done with it all, after 6 years, he just kind of said to me, Coach, you and I filled in each other's gaps, and talk about such a great statement from a 23-year-old guy. Jake was a dynamic player that needed to learn how to play hard early in his career. He needed to be pushed. He needed a lot of those things, some discipline in his game. I was a pretty rigid coach before I got him, and I had to make adjustments because he's not that type of player. And if I would have, we used to run chin, and it's a very systematic thing. And if you've ever seen Jake Rhode play, there is nothing systematic about that. He's a loose player, and I had to adjust the way I coached and the way we played. And it's so funny how trust gets built up over time, and it becomes more of a partnership in terms of with the leadership of that. And so for that, I think it was instrumental for our program and for him being a leader, but it also helped me become a better coach. And I think that's really helped us there.
Yeah, absolute stud, just a point guard that could score at will and could handle it. And I was golfing last year, the CCIW game where Wheaton played at your place. I want to say that was a December game. It feels like it was early. I was golfing. I know where I was golfing, and I have my live stats on my phone. And we had just finished golfing, and it says that Wheaton's winning by 1 or 2 or something. And I'm like, oh, Wheaton's going to win a big road game. And then all of a sudden my phone says final Elmhurst. And I'm like, what just happened? And I see, Jake Rhode makes a 3. I just thought he made a normal 3, but the shot he made to win that game, I mean, like a 40-footer or something like that. I mean, it was all 40 feet, right? Like, what, take us through the finish of that game.
Well, it was an amazing shot. I mean, I can't take any credit on it. It was, well, first of all, you call yourself a Chicago guy and you were playing golf in December. So I don't know if you can really
well, I live in Dallas. What am I going to be doing?
Well, I know, but I don't know if we can really say I'm a South Sider when I'm playing golf in
That's
December.
True.
But no, it's fun. This sounds so stupid to say this, but our guys practice that shot. I mean, our guy, you have all those guys shooting half quarters at the beginning of practice and stuff. And like, we kind of have a list of the guys that can actually make that shot. And so it's funny because you're in the huddle and you're saying, hey, we know the play, we're going to run and we know what we're doing. And it's, again, you don't expect to make that, but you're like, just, shoot the shot that you make at the beginning of practice every day. And,
right.
And what a great shot for him to just have. And the best part about that shot to me was watching his dad because his dad was almost in tears. It was just kind of like, when your son makes that shot, and,
Right.
and it's just, that one was priceless for me.
Another guy that meant a lot to the program was Lavon Thomas. That guy was just a warrior. Watching him, obviously as an Illinois Wesleyan guy, watching him battle Matt Larritz. Talk a little bit about what Lavon Thomas meant to the Blue Jays.
He grew up a lot, and for him, his when he started here, we knew he was talented. He was always been talented, and but he was really raw in terms of just life skills. And it was funny, his junior year, or after his sophomore year, he put on a lot of weight, and he wasn't playing really well, and I benched him. And I have to say that there's a lot of coaches out there in this time that are really worried about benching guys, and I tell you, and I'm digressing, but we've benched the whole starting five that was starting for us this year has been benched. And I don't say that as like a puff up my chest or whatever. You got to be willing to coach guys, and you got to be able to walk the plank with them. And so if you have a good relationship with them and you talk them through it, I think they understand the reason things are going. And Lavon was one of those guys. He got benched as a sophomore. His playing time got cut. He was out of shape. And I told him, I said, "You're out of potential." I said, "You're going to be a junior. All you can do now is perform. There's no such thing as a junior with potential." I said, "You're just a guy that's out there playing." And I give the guy credit. He went to work. He took it the right way, and he came back, and he was a monster for us those last 3 years actually. And just unbelievable hands and feet, and really a lot of the heart and soul of our group too. I mean, he was just a guy that the guys knew he wore his heart on his sleeve.
Then one final guy to call out here, because in any run like you had, there's somebody that just plays really great that maybe the masses didn't expect. And I thought for you that was Dominic Genco. And I had a moment with this kid, Coach Baines, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. There was some post-game conversations. I don't want to get into it. I had some moments with this kid. He's my favorite Elmhurst player ever. That's all I could say. So Dominic Genco, this kid played incredibly well for you in the NCAA tournament. Talk about his season last year, and especially like how he played in the tournament.
He was phenomenal and absolutely awesome down the stretch. You know, here's something, and you talk about the seniors. I don't talk about Dom, but the year before, Jake Rhode had sat out, and Lavon did not play very well.
Right.
And Jay Militello was a unanimous first team all-league player, and Dom Genco was a second team all-league player. The next year, Jay was hurt a lot this year. People didn't really know that a lot, but Jay kind of took a step back, and he was the leading scorer the year before and went to being our fifth leading scorer. And Dom went to the bench and did it because I asked him to.
Right.
And talk about some selfless dudes, and Dom, he went the whole year, and I had him over to the house in late February, and he had actually was kind of struggling, and we were right at the end. And I just said, "Listen, you've been waiting all this time. Just cut it loose. Just go." I said, "I'm not benching, or I'm not gonna not play you. You're gonna play. Just get out there and just fly around." And oh my goodness, he took on like an alter ego in Pomona-Pitzer and in the Wabash game. And whenever Ocean got thrown down in the Wabash game, Dom was the one in there like mixing it up. And not that you want your team mixing up, but I was laughing because I think when Dom transferred here, he would have been like the guy that would have run the other way. And in 3 years' time, he's the guy that's in there pumping his chest up and going. And we don't get to the Final Four without him. I know that.
Yeah, he played great. I think a lot of people think that that you guys lost everything, but you return a bunch And I want to get into this in a second, but as far as I know, you returned Wes Hooker, Ocean Johnson, Jonathan Zapinski, and some others. I think those are the
Mhm.
main three from the nucleus,
Yep.
and they're all really good.
Yeah, they
Um,
are.
i- Wesley Hooker, you talk about a guy that, you know, athletically, not a Division III guy in my book.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a senior now, like now that he's the guy, what do you look for from Wes Hooker this year?
Well, he's one of the Wes had a really bad COVID year, and he would self-admittedly, and he's a guy that likes to play in front of people. I mean, it's just what it is. And I think everybody came back, and he found his groove, and he's an unbelievable defender and rebounder at this level. I mean, unbelievable. And he's really developed as a leader, and the two of us have, I don't know what the word is. We're starting to jive, and I think early on in his career, I think he thought I was a hard coach to play for, and I thought he was a hard player to coach. And we've gotten now to a point where there's a lot of trust, and you can say that on a computer screen, and we'll see when the ball goes up. But he and I talk a lot, and I think he knows I'm trying to look out for the best of him, and I'm trying to develop him, and he knows that we've got the good intentions together. And so I'm really looking forward to that because he is really, really good. And you mentioned Ocean, and we call him Zippy. I don't think I've said Zapinski one time in my life, but Ocean, I'll tell you, I know you always do the the picks to click or whatever it is. Ocean Johnson's going to have an unbelievable year. He deferred a lot of his game uh, to a lot of other guys just because he's a good teammate. And I think with some of those guys gone, I think you're going to see a different level of player in him. And Zapinski, Zippy is. I told him the other day he's the bass in the quartet. He's never he doesn't sing the melody, but he's the foundation of every song. And he is just a rock solid guy. He knows everything, and he's the smartest guy on the team. And you go down the line, everybody says, who do you want to play with, and they say Zippy. And so we're very fortunate that we've got three guys that are battle tested and good, and I think that can really help us.
And I know you've got good freshmen. I think you have a transfer or two in there. Is there I don't know if you'll even answer this question. Is there a newcomer that you feel the most confident in? Like, hey, you better look out for this guy. Is there a guy that you're like, wow?
Well, if the NCAA would change the rules and let us work with our players in the fall, I'd be able to answer that question. No, the two guys that we brought in three transfers. We had an unbelievable freshman recruiting class. So in terms of talent, this is an extremely talented team. There's a lot of puzzle pieces to put together. I'd say the two guys that were on our roster that come to mind to me are Cole Hornbuckle and Tegan Pearson. Those two guys were capable of playing on most of our teams last year, but we had all these guys return with COVID years, and they just got stacked up behind them.
Right.
And that happened in a lot of programs. You look in the league. I think that those two are really capable of being really good, and so I think I'm very optimistic because I think we're not gonna fall off the planet. I think we can put out a really good team.
CCIW this year, usually coming into a year, it's somewhat easy to figure out who the favorites are. It
Right.
doesn't mean like last year it was like, okay, is it Elmhurst, Wheaton, or Illinois Wesleyan? It's one of the three. Which one? And then you could pick. There's always a year. Either you can always do that. John, I have no idea. I've told people I have zero idea. I could pick 6 teams, and I can make an argument for about 6 teams being the favorite this year. Do you have a sense of, I mean, is there a top 1 or 2 or 3 teams that, let's take yourself out of it. Blue Jays
Right.
don't count right now. Who's the favorite on the men's basketball side of the CCIW this year?
I'm with you. I don't know. I will say that I think that Wheaton and Wesleyan are in the same boat in the terms of they've lost a lot, but there's a lot of talent left, and and it's similar, I think, in our way that we have. And so you never know how any of that stuff gets put together. I will say that some of the teams that placed behind us this past year, I think they're all going to get better.
Yeah.
I think Augie played a lot of guys and they kind of took their lumps. I go
Yep.
back to with the Jake Rhode teams, we went 500 for 2 years in a row. Those
Right.
guys, but we played them. We played Derek Dotlich. We played Nick Perry. We played those guys and then they got better. And I think Augie's in that position and Milliken's in that position. And then there's some really um, elite players. North Central may have the best player in the league in Matt
Yeah.
Helwig. And then, Carthage has got their guy, Vladovic. And, I think there's all that. And I don't know how it's all going to go. North Park's got a new coach and Carroll always, Paul knows what he's doing. They always are good. So it is a toss up. There's a lot of teams in the mix. Um, yeah, it's going to be kind of crazy. What I hope doesn't happen for our league is that we beat up on each other, and we'll have a really good third place team, but the record won't indicate it, and we won't get that second or third team in.
The reason I don't think that'll happen is because the entire country is in the same position as the CCIW. If you look at every league, generally it's the same thing. It's like, wow, everyone lost a ton. Look at the WIAC, although Oshkosh does return a boatload in Platteville, but I think that things will balance out by the time we get to January, and the records will be the records that we usually see. But I think you agree, it's probably the most wide open year, I don't know, in the last decade or so. It seems like it's totally wide open this year.
At the top, I really do think it is. I mean, you can kind of get a feel, but yeah, who knows what's going to happen. And I think that's honestly for me, that's a little, I feel good about that because, when you lose a lot of guys, even if
Yeah.
you think you can put together a decent team, if you know that there's 2 or 3 teams, you're like, we're not beating those guys. I think that we can compete with all of them. And so for me, it gives me a little solace.
Just a couple more questions before I let you go, and appreciate your time. The CCIW, you're not quite a lifer because we have to count that you were at St. Francis for a couple of years, but you're pretty much a lifer, John. You're kind of in to me, Bosco and John Baines and Dennie Bridges, like you're a CCIW guy. The league has been incredible forever. It has. What's it like playing in a league where, you finish third and be a Final Four candidate almost every year? Like what's the CCIW like to compete in as a coach?
I think, it's been a great time for me. I love every minute of it. I hate saying this because sometimes it gets coaches rubbed the wrong way from other leagues, and I don't mean to intend that way. I feel like we're kind of like the Big Ten or one of the big leagues in our division. And I think there's something really fun about knowing that if you can win our league or be at the top of our league, you can beat anybody in the country. And it doesn't mean you will, but there is something that makes that really fun to coach. And knowing that, if you're at a school that at the D1 level and you get to the NCAA tournament and you got to play Duke, you're out, you're done, and we don't have that. And
Right.
so I think that's been the fun part of it. I think the fans and I think the proximity of the schools, I think there's always been something that is overlooked. There's something about being able to drive to Wheaton or North Central. Our farthest game for us is to drive 2 hours and 45 minutes to Milliken. In some leagues, that's a normal trip or more. And so I think it's the proximity of the league and how good the teams are, I think has made it's been a blast for me.
Coaching and getting into coaching. I think this is something that a lot of the aspiring coaches appreciate that I ask, and I want to make sure I ask it. Your path. I think you got your master's degree. At some point, I can't remember all the steps here, but you ended up at Elmhurst as an assistant. You were the head coach at NAI St. Francis, which is a huge deal. So the business. What advice do you have for, say, a senior in college or a grad assistant, a 22-year-old young man, young woman that wants to be a Division III coach, what advice would you give that person?
That's a huge question. That may be a whole nother podcast, but it's no, I guess I'd say two things. Number one, if you really want to do this, you're gonna have to grind a little bit. I had a teaching job. I was a math teacher and a high school coach for a year, and then I became an assistant for $15,000 a year and lived in the football coach's attic for 4 years to string it all together. And you got to want it. And if you can envision yourself doing something else, then you probably should. If you can't, then you're doing it right. And so I think you got to be prepared for the grind. And then I tell the story. The very, very first clinic I ever went to was Mike Krzyzewski talking Duke basketball. It was at a Hilton or whatever in Chicago, whatever. And I was young, 22, 23, something. And I remember there were two segments, and the first segment was defense, and it was Duke's defense. That was Grant Hill and Leitner and all those guys. And the place was packed. I mean, just wall to wall. I was too deep on the sides. I'm standing, and so he does this thing, and then 2 hours later, he said, you have lunch, you guys can go get a beer, do whatever you want to do, but we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the wheel and talk about building the team and personalities and everything. I'm not joking. There were 30% of the people came back, and I sat in the third row. And as a young coach, that was really impressionable to me. I was like, none of us have players to run Duke's defense. Not one of us can do that. But I am coaching the same age guys that he is. And if I can learn how to do that, I'm going to beat 70% of these guys. And so it really got me in a focus of, for the next years, I really made a big push for me to learn how to connect with people and coach different personalities and put teams together. And I think that stuff has made so much of a difference with our program and how I've coached and the relationships I've gotten. And if you're getting into this, it's about that. And there will be X's and O's. You got to know that stuff. But if you can get that, you got a chance.
Very well said. And I think people appreciate that, because there's a lot of folks that will watch this that are interested in getting in coaching. Just a couple more things. A few years ago, can't remember how many, you got tossed at the Shirk, and someone that was there, and I don't know if this is urban legend. To me, it's the greatest line ever if it's true, but I don't know if it's true. They said when Baines got tossed, it was because he said it's called Dennie Bridges Court, not Ron Rose Court. Is that true, John?
Now, Ron is one of my good friends. So yes, I did say that. Now, I did remember a tweet by a guy that said "Circle of Life" as I was walking out, and there was the national championship.
It was right above your head.
Yeah. And so I do remember somebody saying that. It might have been you. But no, I did say that, but Ron still laughs at it. He goes, "Did you really say that?" And I said, "Well, there was like 2 seconds left. I had to."
It was very right. There was like a 2-minute flurry of the game where the game swung, and there were some calls in there, right? But someone's like, "Yeah, this is what John said." I was like, "That's tremendous. If you really said it, kudos." Dennie Bridges, you played for Coach Bridges at Illinois Wesleyan. I'm just curious what you took from Dennie that has made it into your current coaching. Like what was it? Dennie, obviously one of the most successful coaches in Division III history. What did you take from Coach Bridges?
He was such a good offensive coach. I've had some really good coaches. I've stolen from a lot of different guys. I think Coach Bridges, the way I learned about offense and spacing and the way he taught it was just really remarkable to me. And I don't know if anybody really noticed, but I was a role player. I was a bench guy, and but I always sat next to him, and I always felt like I always just wanted to understand what was kind of going through his head and what he was doing. And but he was that, and he was also a great players coach, and that sometimes that comes with a negative connotation. People think players coaches means the players, it's a loose ship and all that stuff.
Right.
It's a tight ship. It was a tight ship. It's a tight ship for us. But he was easy to play for. And I think for me, I was like, I want to be easy to play for. This is supposed to be fun. For the players, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fun for me. Why would I want to do a job where I don't like it? I don't want to be around people. And so I was like, I got to let the guys have a good time, let them enjoy it, coach them hard, get them right. And then for me, do the same thing. And he's had a wonderful life and he's got his name on the court, and everybody respects him as a coach. And so I said to myself, I take that from him.
Was it easier? Is it easier being a coach because you were what you call the role player? Now, you were a very good role player on a national championship team and multiple conference championship teams. Is it easier to be a head coach coming from that mindset versus, the superstar of the team becoming the coach? Anything to that, or it doesn't matter?
It might be. I think, I don't know. I will say this. I think it's much easier to coach your bench and the other guys whenever you've been in that position. I think I have a respect for the guy that stands up and waves the towel and doesn't play. And we actually film it. Like I in film, we always cut guys and be like, look at that, was a great arrow point on that 3-point and all that stuff. And I think you learn how to coach that stuff, and you keep those guys. You recognize their impact, and I think that's important on that. I think with the star guys, I'm not going to say they can't coach, because they probably can, but I think for them, I think that's a hard adjustment to make whenever they're looking down at the 12th guy, and they're, as I said before, it's they take the bus, but it's not the same ride for them.
Right. Very well said. John, I really appreciate this. And, just on my end, I think we need to do this again, because there's about 20 other topics we probably need to go down a whole nother hour-long road for. But kudos to you for just what you've done in building the Elmhurst program. Again, I mean, now when people build a top 25 ballot, they say, what about Elmhurst? What's Elmhurst got coming back this year? You played in the national championship game. You're 9 years in, this will be 10, you're 205 victories, pretty amazing as a head coach. I want to give you the last word. You're going to have some Elmhurst fans, some Division III fans, some random fans tuning in. What are your final thoughts for the listeners of the QCast here today?
Well, I really appreciate what you've done with it. And I was at Fort Wayne was awesome for me for so many reasons, and I got to see the table with all the people that have really supported D3 and have put in that time, and the exposure of it now is when I played 20 whatever years ago, the exposure is so much different than it is now, and I would say to you, I'm thankful that we have you and we have others that are doing all this, because it makes it special for the players. It's really good. It gives them that experience. And when we went, like our guys, they were at a special place, and it meant something to them, and something that they'll get the rest of their lives. And it was because of the exposure and people like you doing this. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And again, if you see my guy, Dom Genco, tell him I'm thinking about him. I appreciated our time together after the national championship game. Love that kid. John Baines, the head coach of the Elmhurst University Blue Jays, poised for another monster season this year, coming into a wide open CCIW. Folks, that is the QCast Season 3, Episode 2. John Baines, good luck to you and the Blue Jays, and we'll see you at a Division III game this year, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.